When it comes to breakout players, Drew Allar is one of the obvious ones for Penn State, but there are a few other surprises that have stepped up in a big way that makes Penn State a perennial college football playoff contender.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Biggest surprises, biggest disappointments, letdowns this season for Penn State football through two games, and final keys for Penn State versus Kent State. We'll discuss all of it in today's Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Help me welcome him back. Special guest on today's show is Adam Sheetz. He's a free agent sportscaster, the former Penn State men's basketball insider at Penn State's Com Radio, also covered football, baseball, and other sports, and he is the voice of State College high school football on the radio. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Biggest surprises, there's tons of obvious ones here, Adam, and I'd appreciate everybody's thoughts in the comments section. Who are the biggest standout players to you? And you can let us know who needs to step up, who needs to improve as well. Drew Allar's the obvious one, right? The quarterback has taken a huge leap forward. It's not just a step, it's a leap, but it doesn't surprise me because this was the expectations that we had put together throughout the offseason, the preseason, that Drew Allar was going to take this step forward and be much better. The guys that are that breakout surprise player, Zane Durant, somebody that we've been waiting for, but Zane Durant's always had the potential and the upside, but he's currently Penn State's best player analytically. When I think of surprise players, Zane Durant alongside Drew Allar, but we were expecting that are the first ones to come to mind here.
Yeah, I mean, Zane Durant's a huge one, as you mentioned. He's a guy who's, been real promised as he's developed his way through this program, and you're starting to see him take that step. A guy I looked at as a huge surprise for me, and this is also a testament to Drew Allar's improvement as well, is a guy like Amari Evans. I mean, he's a guy that was very highly touted, had a really good freshman year coming in reserve spots, was supposed to be that deep ball threat last year, took a step back, struggled to find his way on the field. He was injured before the season. I think that might have hurt him, kind of getting going through the summer. But then, this year you saw he had the big catch right before half against West Virginia. And he had another touchdown that was called back due to offensive pass interference against Bowling Green as well. He's really proven to be a weapon in that wide receiver. You have Harrison Wallace III, who's the clear number one wide receiver. Julian Fleming's a good route runner, still hasn't really gotten going yet. I mean, obviously James Franklin's praised his ability to run block and the veteran things he's doing in the wide receiver room as a leader. But Amari Evans really starting to emerge as one of those guys that can test teams down the field. He's always known as a speed guy. He's starting to make some leaping catches, doing some interesting things. And if you get that true deep ball threat for this Penn State offense, when you have guys like Harrison Wallace III that can go deep, as well as a great route runner in the intermediate game, as well as Tyler Warren and that run game, they become truly one of the most dangerous offenses in the Big Ten. I think Amari Evans is a huge reason why right now.
Well, it's that diversity, that versatility, and I think you and I agree that Amari Evans is the key to taking this offense to another level. Okay, so this offense can be good. This offense can be really good with Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Trey Wallace, and I think he fits into this category as well as that surprising player because not enough people bought into the fact that he would have been the clear-cut number one wide receiver. Now he is. But Amari Evans specifically has potential that if they can unlock it in this season, he takes that offense from really good to great, potentially elite, because he can do things that, as you mentioned, other wide receivers can't, and that's simply because of his speed, his agility, his ability to go from 0 to 100, so acceleration in a matter of seconds. I mean, Amari Evans is what can make this offense that much more dynamic if they can get him consistent. He's dropped some passes here and there, but he is definitely a surprise. He's definitely been a breakout player to this point because he is classified as that number two wide receiver. Not Julian Fleming, as you mentioned, not a Liam Clifford, not a Caden Saunders, and it's not to be critical of them, but Amari Evans has been that second go-to wide receiver for Drew Allar in this offense.
Yeah, and it's something James Franklin's always wanted. Ever since he's been there, you look at his best offense, he's always had a real speed guy that can take the top off the defense. KJ Hamler was one of the first guy that comes to your mind, that 2019 team. He was really the key to that entire attack. They had a lot of good running backs, but his ability to create plays down the field really changed the way that team they were playing. It was Sean Clifford statistically one of his best years. You saw how they were able to hit the deep ball in 2022 when Sean Clifford and the team won the Rose Bowl, had some deep plays down the field. That's how they want to attack, because that opens everything up. When you have that dangerous of a backfield as they have with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, if you can force them to keep those safeties back, lighten up the box a little bit, I mean, those two can go nuts, and we've seen that. Nicholas Singleton already over 200 yards rushing for the season. He's having a great start to his season. I mean, you just look at what they can do so many different ways in the run game just because they have a weapon that can go down the field. That's what they were missing last year, and now they have that. They're playing more 3 wide receiver sets, still have a great tight end room. Being able to get those receivers out and running has just been so huge. And allows Drew Allar to let his arm loose. I mean, he's a big arm quarterback. That's what he was touted as coming into Penn State. And he's been able to do that so well this year. So I think, as you mentioned, I mean, Amari Evans is the guy that can take this offense to the next level. And he's done that through 2 games. Now, again, got to get more consistent, got to get rid of the drop. Something that'll happen. You got 2 bye weeks this year to work on that. So game against Kent State this week to work on that before they get their first, as of right now, ranked matchup against Illinois. So just kind of staying focused and getting ready. But Amari Evans has had a great start to 2024.
And you can see that there's clearly trust in Amari Evans, because even after a couple of drops against Bowling Green, Drew Allar and Andy Kotelnicki were still going to him. Andy Kotelnicki calling plays centered around him. Drew Allar still trusting him by throwing him the football as that prime target on that given play. I want to go back to the defense there. Tony Rojas is way ahead of schedule. I thought Tony Rojas was someone that, okay, week 6, week 7, probably around the heart of the schedule. So USC, Ohio State, and that would have been valuable. But the fact that he's turning the corner now in weeks 1 and 2 and truly being not just a key contributor, he plays a specific role. No, he is a playmaker at that linebacker spot, and that's why Penn State's able to start with this 4-2-5 base defense, because Tony Rojas next to Kobe King becomes that star linebacker that Penn State has been looking for, with Abdul Carter going to defensive end.
Yeah, and I think you hit it. He's exactly who I was going to say on the defensive side of the ball. This is a group that we talked about a lot this offseason, that what's this linebacker group going to look like? They're kind of thin, a lot of young guys, and Tony Rojas has stepped right in, taken that next step, and has been a great player, had his first interception last week. He's just doing so many great things defensively. He was really good in the West Virginia game, creating pressure. He's been all over the field. He's the type of guy that, when James Franklin, when you look at Penn State linebackers they have had in that room in the past, guys that are all over the field, just always seem to be around the ball. He seems to be another one of those guys, just has a knack for finding the football and making plays when he needs to. It's been a huge step. He seems mature as well for such a young guy. He's shown some maturity out there, being gap sound, making sure he's staying home and disciplined, which is a great testament to this defensive staff and their development of him from year 1 to year 2. But just a great start to his sophomore campaign for Penn State. And you got to be happy to see what he can do now as he moves forward as well, because he's only going to get better as the more reps he gets.
I want to finish up with the secondary briefly, and then we'll go to the disappointments on the team, guys that need to improve here, guys that have stepped up in a big way. Jaylen Reed looks like that elite safety. KJ Winston's in a category of his own, but Jaylen Reed is not too far behind and is playing like it through 2 games. And I'll give you one that is really a surprise here, because I expected him to be a role kind of guy, special teams. Elliott Washington. The reason James Franklin won't commit to having 2 starting corners week in, week out, A.J. Harris has been really good, but part of the reason it gets so convoluted and crowded in this cornerback room is because of the emergence of Elliott Washington, who is truly the biggest surprise out of all the Penn State players this season.
Yeah, I mean, Elliott Washington's a guy, he's a big playmaker. He finds a way to make plays on the ball. He's really good in jump ball situations. That's what makes him so exciting. And that's the type of thing James Franklin always wants, guys who can create turnovers. That's why we've seen Zachy Wheatley find his way on the field year in and year out in that safety room that's been so loaded. He's a guy they've been unable to really take off the field for long periods of time because he makes plays and creates turnovers. I think that's what they see with Elliott Washington, a guy who can go up, make plays, create havoc, and force teams, to look off, because if it's close, he's going to be able to make a play on the ball and maybe create a big turnover and swing the game for Penn State. I think that's what they see with him. That's why he's been such a surprise for this defense. It was a corner room that we talked about how great that secondary was. The corners, they lost a lot from last year. How would they step in? And Elliott Washington's been another guy who's just been a big surprise and shows that's another deep corner room that Penn State has. They can rotate guys in and out and be as dangerous as anyone in the secondary.
Now we'll turn the conversation to the biggest disappointments, the letdowns, and one of them was supposed to be Penn State's best player overall on this team. Arguably, we'll talk about who that is and some of the other players that need to improve on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And today's episode is also brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Hey, football fans, fall is here. And that means one thing: college football is back, and it's better than ever. And to make sure you're ready, we partnered with Home Field, the exclusive apparel sponsor of our show, to bring you their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. Home Field is the go-to for premium collegiate apparel, crafted with comfort in mind and featuring vintage designs that'll make you the envy of any tailgate. With over 180 schools to choose from, including Penn State, there's something for every fan. But the real MVP is the Home Field Platinum Football Box. This is your all-access pass to exclusive gear for the 2024 season with 3 never-before-seen items from your school, plus VIPs get even more. You get a special hat and the 2024 Platinum Pass for early access and discounts all season long. So don't wait. Head over to homefieldapparel.com and gear up today, and you can use my promo code for 15% off at checkout. That is WEARE24, WEARE24 at checkout for 15% off. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com. Let's make this season unforgettable. The first player in this category, Adam, that I'm going to start with is because the pedigree that he has, the impact that he's going to make eventually, but through the first 2 games, it's been rough. And that's Abdul Carter at defensive end. This has been quite the learning curve. Now, offenses are still devoting a lot of attention to him. He's seeing double teams, but if you look at PFF, Abdul Carter is currently the worst defender on Penn State's roster overall. Out of all the defenders that have logged snaps for Penn State, Abdul Carter has the lowest grade. It's surprising, surprising because of just how good Abdul Carter is. I feel like you could play him anywhere, he'd still make an impact to this point. The analytics say that he's been really bad.
Yeah, I think the one thing maybe we didn't take as much credit is that position change. I think maybe it's more of a learning curve than maybe we expected him, moving from linebacker up to defensive end. I mean, he's still a great player. He won a lot of one-on-one matchups in the West Virginia game, but he's not really taken that next step as you see as this game-wrecking edge rusher for Penn State. We haven't seen that through 2 games. Now, there's a lot of season left. He's going to face a lot of teams. Bowling Green did a great job getting the ball out quick, really made the edge rushers a non-factor in that game. That's why they have such a great offensive performance. But, it's definitely that next step that we need to see from Abdul Carter. And the reason we're talking about him being a disappointment is how highly touted he was coming into this year and the big expectations we had for him. Now, he really hasn't lived up to that. He hasn't been terrible. He's been, as you mentioned, graded, one of the worst defenders on this Penn State team through 2 games. I don't expect that to continue. I expect him to have some big games as the season goes on. But it's definitely been a little bit of a surprise that through 2 games, we aren't seeing that big impact that I think a lot of people on that coaching staff expected from Abdul Carter.
No, and that just brings to light how a position change can really affect you as a player. And granted, yes, he's not going from defense to offense or vice versa. He's going from linebacker to defensive end. So how much could really be that different for Abdul Carter, who was essentially a stand-up pass rusher a season ago? But when your role changes and you are specifically rushing after the passer, you're not dropping back into coverage, you're not, shading to a specific gap to defend the run. Abdul Carter's job is completely different, and the learning curve is bigger than what we anticipated here. But better days of football are ahead for Abdul Carter in a matter of weeks, at the most, I think a month. I really do think Abdul Carter by week 6, week 7, week 8, will turn the corner and return to that superstar status. But he needs to improve. That's the conversation here. Somebody else that needs to improve on the defensive side of the football is Kobe King. I had Kobe King as one of the top 5 most valuable players overall on this team, because especially with linebacker depth being one of the biggest question marks on this team going into the season, Kobe King, he's ready to emerge. He's an NFL type of player. He's missing some assignments. He's missing some tackles that, as that veteran linebacker of the group, and I know there's Tyler Elsdon and Dom DeLuca, but everybody understands that the overall better player is Kobe King here. Granted, I think Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, will be invited. I think they do have futures in the NFL in some capacity, but Kobe King I view as a future NFL starter at some point. And Kobe King is not living up to that right now. So as the veteran linebackers, the Mike linebackers calling out all the assignments, he needs to be better, plain and simple.
Yeah, I think, the one thing this segment we just did before, biggest surprise, he would have been near that last year with how great of a start he got off to last year. Now you're seeing, right. I think we had high praise for him this year coming in. We had a lot of expectations. Hasn't really lived up to that. Again, it's just 2 games. It's too early to really tell, if this is going to continue or maybe just a slow start. I think the one thing with Kobe as well is he with the new helmet, the coach being able to talk to the players in the helmets, he's that guy that's now calling out every assignment. So I don't know, maybe he's thinking a lot on trying to get those plays out to everybody with it in his headset, and then trying to, then okay, now I know what everyone else is going to do. Now what do I do? Maybe he's thinking a lot, and that's just been an adjustment for him as well. Now that's something, Coach Franklin, the defense, I'm sure they're not going to tell us that, now he's just thinking too much with everything going on with that. I'm sure he's just going to grow with it and keep moving forward. But it's definitely been a surprise. This is a linebacker room we talked about with Tony Rojas. There were a lot of questions. He was the one guy we weren't really questioning. He was the guy we expected to come in, take another step, have a really good year, and be the leader of that room, and have a great player at that position, and be, linebacker you still think at Penn State this year, he was going to be the big reason why. And, it's just been off to a slow start, which is something that, causes some concern if you're a Penn State fan. Like, he had a good year last year, but now kind of dropping back. We got to see what that step's going to be. He can't take a step back. And maybe it's also, the coaching change, coming from Manny Diaz being a linebackers coach to Tom Allen, maybe there was just a different in communication and just some growing pains with that as well. But I think, there's definitely a lot of questions that need to be answered for Kobe King as the season moves forward.
What's your sense of Jaylen Kimber to this point, Adam? Because I think he also falls in this category. I didn't expect Jaylen Kimber to be elite or A.J. Harris level of playmaking ability right now. But you look at Pro Football Focus and the eye test as well, Jaylen Kimber's coverage, and this is part of the reason why James Franklin isn't committing to, okay, A.J. Harris and Jaylen Kimber are our cornerbacks, or Cam Miller. Cam Miller at times had opportunities to make plays on the football. So I would kind of lump those two together in a sense that the secondary, because Elliott Washington is playing better, but it's also that Cam Miller and Jaylen Kimber aren't exactly living up to expectations either.
Yeah, I think Jaylen Kimber, he's well-traveled. I think there was a lot of hype with him coming into this year. He started his career at Georgia, then transferred to Florida. Now he's at Penn State. He has a lot of talent, but it definitely has not been that, coming out as you've seen. I don't think any people expect him to be A.J. Harris. I don't think many people expect him to be an elite lockdown corner, but it definitely hasn't been that, great start to a season that you'd hope from a corner coming in, that I think a lot of people had high hopes for, that he would be a really good corner, really strengthen the room and help with depth. He just hasn't been that. You've seen other guys, again, the reason Elliott Washington's been really good, and you'd think he'd be pushing Jaylen Kimber, and now it's kind of leaning towards maybe he's taking that spot as that third corner, along with Cam Miller, of course, being in that room as well. So, it's definitely been something that Jaylen Kimber, he's going to have to work on. He's a guy that's been on the field. He's a veteran. He's an older guy, but you'd expect, a lot more from him through 2 games. And again, it's a room that a defense, Penn State loves to rotate a lot of guys. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities. Yeah. You'd expect a lot of opportunities this weekend against Kent State, a game Penn State should be able to handle pretty easily. And, it's definitely going to be time for a couple of those guys, specifically Jaylen Kimber, to step up and start making those plays and showing that coaching staff, I know what I am. I'm coming from Florida. I have a lot of talent, and start putting that on the football field.
Offense has done well, given the expectations, and I just don't think there were a lot of them, right? The only place to go was up. If I'm looking at somebody who's been a disappointment, absolutely needs to take a major step forward sooner rather than later, is Drew Shelton. Drew Shelton's been bad, and that's backed up not only by the film, the footage, the tape, but Pro Football Focus definitely puts it into perspective as well. Had an okay game against West Virginia, was decent in pass blocking, did well in pass blocking, and then run blocking was missing assignments. And then the Bowling Green game, everything broke down, whether it was pass blocking, run blocking. Drew Shelton ultimately got benched for Nolan Rucci. Nolan Rucci came in and did okay. He did better than Drew Shelton, but that's because the results from Shelton were not admirable in that Bowling Green game. And part of the reason, why Bowling Green was able to stay so close into it, there was a lot of unnecessary pressure on Drew Allar, and that's why Penn State felt it needed to make a change in the middle of the game. So Drew Shelton needs to improve, or that left tackle spot overall needs to improve, because I don't know if Drew Shelton's going to be the clear-cut starter going forward to protect Drew Allar's blind side.
Yeah, that's the number one thing, Penn State's going to have to figure out. They're a team that wants to push the ball down the field. They've shown that through 2 games. And to do that, you got to protect the quarterback and give him time to make the throws. And they're going to face a lot better pass rushes than they saw against Bowling Green last Saturday. You think Ohio State's going to have a really, really good one that's going to come in on November 2nd. So, you got to start to think and look at it and say, now, if Drew Shelton's not going to cut it, we got to find a way. Nolan Rucci's a guy that came in, I think a lot of people really high on him, thought about maybe a rotation piece, but now that door's starting to open, that left tackle spot could be open for him to step in and take, and I'm sure he's trying to seize that opportunity right there at that position. I think Drew Shelton, he's had an interesting career. He came in when Olu Fashanu got hurt, had a decent finish to that season. Last year, was high expectations, but he wasn't really, take that next step guy at the tackle position for Penn State last year. And again, it's still just not, you'd expect more, expect the guy to take that next step, but he's still kind of been around what he was his first year when he came in for Olu and had a good finish to the year. He's been serviceable, but he hasn't taken that next step to be like, oh, this is a great left tackle that's going to be a certified guy, and Drew Allar's never going to have to worry about his blind side with a guy like that protecting it. And now that's just not been the case. And I'm sure James Franklin and Coach Troutline is, thinking about ways to help that offensive line and figure out what's the best combination moving forward. Because this is a team that, as you mentioned, the offense has been good, but they're definitely looking to take that next step. And run blocking is going to be huge. They want to make big plays, and that left tackle position is going to be so important. So I'm sure Penn State's going to be, assessing everything going into this week and future games to see what's the best combination.
And out of all the question marks you can have, quarterback's certainly not one of them that you can't have as a football team. Yeah. Left tackle. If you have a right-handed quarterback, it's different if you have a left-handed one. If you have a right-handed quarterback, which Penn State does, left tackle cannot be a question mark, especially when Penn State is going to turn the corner and enter into Big Ten conference play. They'll finish up non-conference play with Kent State. The Golden Flashes. Penn State is a minus 49.5 point favorite. What to watch for, because we're anticipating a Penn State victory. We're anticipating a Penn State blowout victory, but these are the key things to watch for when it comes to Penn State versus Kent State. We'll discuss all of that and more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, but we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, and that date is almost here, so you only have a little bit more time to take advantage of this. All FanDuel customers can bet just $5. $5 and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game, and all you need is a Google account and a current form payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you look over at FanDuel.com, Penn State versus Kent State game lines are available. Penn State is a minus 48.5 point favorite. There's no money line on this game, and the total is set at 55.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now at FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Penn State versus Kent State, 3:30 kickoff, Big Ten Network, out of Beaver Stadium. Penn State's going to win. Penn State's going to win by a lot. And a lot of the action's going to happen in the first half, because I think Penn State, this is the biggest thing that I'm watching for, Adam, is that Penn State is going to make sure that a lot of the backups, a lot of the players that we have not seen to this point get playing time, and get playing time early. We'll see if that's even into halfway through the second quarter. I'm not talking about Drew Allar, Bo Prabula, because you don't need to see anything from Bo Prabula. Mm-hmm. You don't need him to be in the game as soon as possible. But the players that I want to see more of Cooper Cousins. I would like to see Luke Reynolds play a significant amount of time. Tyseer Denmark. Any of those wide receivers that we talked to, Tyler Johnson has potential. Mekhi Flowers changed positions, right? Anybody at that wide receiver spot. I don't need to necessarily see anything from Julian Fleming or Liam Clifford, even though we haven't seen anything from this point. It's about the backup players. And then you flip it over to the defense. Anthony Specca, Kari Jackson, we're harping on the linebacker depth. Those guys are true freshman linebackers. How will they handle it? Because Kent State is going to leave it in its starters. They have to, because they got to do something. They got to offer some resistance. It is embarrassing to get blown out by anyone. It doesn't matter that it's Tennessee, and Tennessee's a top 10 team. 71-0 is terrible. I imagine that Kent State is going to feel at least a little motivated, a little slighted. Penn State, and I am going to look past Kent State. I am going to think about Illinois in a potential top 25 matchup. Sorry, the Golden Flashes haven't done anything to this point to prove me otherwise that will make me think that this game is competitive. I imagine that Kent State's going to play with an edge, but at the end of the day, Penn State is just too talented. Better coaches, better players, better discipline. It's just a difference in programs at this point. So the big thing that I'm watching for is how soon do those freshmen and backup role players who are not veterans just yet get in the game?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know where Kent State's program is, don't look at the 71-0 game against Tennessee. Look at the fact that they played St. Francis and lost 23-17.
Ooh.
That's where you got to look, because I saw the big conversation going into this game wasn't, Penn State playing Kent State. It was, why does Penn State just not pay St. Francis, a team from Pennsylvania, and give them the payday instead of paying Kent State to come in and play this game? So that's kind of the question right now. Kent State, they're not a good team. This is not the year. They're 0-3 on the year. They've had a tough start. They had to go to Tennessee last week. It's just not been a year. Now, they're obviously hoping once they get into MAC play, maybe things can change for them. Maybe they can win some games and figure some things out. So they'll be playing their starters. But the big thing is, this is where I think the Bowling Green game might actually help Penn State a little bit, is they weren't necessarily completely ready to play. They trailed at halftime, had to gut it out, win that game by 7. But you saw the adjustments at halftime. They woke up. I think it's going to be complete right away. Penn State's going to be ready to go. They're going to say, we got to figure this thing out, get this thing over as quickly as possible, get those guys in, because you got to see the depth. Because when you start a season with a game against West Virginia, you're not going to get many opportunities. Plus, it's a road game, so you can't travel as many guys to see, see the depth and see all those players get opportunities. You'd expect Bowling Green to be one of those games, but it just turned out that's not how it was. This is a game where James Franklin's going to hopefully be able to come in the press conference and talk about how many players got opportunities to play and how many snaps and things like that, how many freshmen got the opportunities and everything. And that's something he's going to want to do, and I think they'll be ready to play and go. I think if you want to watch, as you said, there's a lot of guys you want to see. I think a big one's Luke Reynolds, because they finally gave him the green light yesterday after Andrew Raplia's injury. So you got to think that he's going to be a guy that a lot of people are going to see. Can he be in that tight end room and be a threat behind Tyler Warren? And that's something I think a lot of fans are going to be excited to see. And you mentioned, we don't really need to see much of Beau Pribula. I mean, I think the interesting to see will be see Ethan Grunkmeyer, because, Beau Pribula, he's so valuable in the offense, not as a quarterback, just as a weapon, that you really can't afford him to get hurt in garbage time playing quarterback reps. Got to have Grunkmeyer ready as well. So I think that's something I think a lot of fans are going to be excited to see as well. But this isn't a game that you should be like, Penn State. I mean, obviously they got to handle their business. There's no team in the country that can just walk on the field and just, not really even try and win a game. They got to be ready to go and ready to play. I think they will be, but it's definitely a game where you should, make sure you have your program out with the roster and see how many freshmen can get in and see the players you should be excited to watch.
Somebody else that I failed to mention in that, and it applies to the Luke Reynolds, Tyser Denmark. I'm glad you brought up Ethan Grunkmeyer. Dejon Lane is another player that absolutely needs to be in this game sooner rather than later. Don't wait till the second half. See if you can get him into the late in the first quarter, early second quarter. Dejon Lane has been discussed as that fourth safety. So after Winston, after Wheatley, after Reed, it's the true freshman Dejon Lane. He had the green light to Cooper Cousins, and those were the only two players. Now Luke Reynolds does by proxy, by need, but also because he can handle it too. Aside from that, Lane was one of the first players, and we haven't really seen him on defense at all. We've seen him on special teams, but not at all on defense. And he's the next in line to play safety. That's a big deal when you have a potential top 25 matchup on the horizon with Illinois in prime time. UCLA is UCLA. Penn State will win that game. But then you go to Southern California and you play USC. And Dejon Lane is the next man up as a true freshman who has not played to this point. Start him for all I care, but get him in the game as soon as possible so that he can get as many reps going, because you can't do that against Illinois. Oh, we'll get you reps against. No, this is the time to do it now against Kent State.
Yeah, I mean, and Dejon Lane, I think, is the big one, as you mentioned. I think when you look at that safety room, If one guy goes down, Dejan Lane's going to be next in there. It's going to be one of those guys rotating in. And you mentioned the big game, obviously Illinois, UCLA. Illinois is a top 25 team right now. Credit to Brett Bielema on what he's doing with the Illini. UCLA rebuild situation. They just lost 42-13 to Indiana. They're trying to figure things out. Penn State gets them at home. Shouldn't have any problems. But that game against USC, you're playing a Lincoln Riley offense. He finds weaknesses and he knows how to exploit it. He thinks there's a weakness with a freshman safety coming in. They will go at Dejan Lane until they prove that they can't. And I think you got to get him ready. You got to get him reps because you don't want to be the first time he's playing true reps to be in a game in Southern California against one of the best offensive coaches and one of the best offenses in the country. Got to have him ready to go. And this week's a perfect opportunity. You're giving Dejan Lane an opportunity to make plays and get out there and just play because the one thing you can't teach is in-game experience. And Dejan Lane's going to need that moving forward in Big Ten play.
Penn State versus Kent State this Saturday, and Penn State will win by a lot, but that's why we're looking towards the experience and what players can step up in this moment so that they're ready to go at a moment's notice in a game like Illinois, in a game like USC, Ohio State, because Penn State's going to need them at some point in time, and you don't want them to be unprepared. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A big thanks to Adam Sheetz over there on the other side, free agent sportscaster. All of his social platforms will be linked down in the description. Go check out his work. He is also the voice, the play-by-play voice on the radio for State College high school football. You can listen to him every Friday night for this season. Adam, thanks so much for the time and talking some Penn State football once again.
Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
And again, thanks for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, but more importantly, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Who are the biggest surprise players to you? Who are the players that have been letdowns in your mind? I want to know your thoughts in the comments section. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Thank you for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin. He's talking about everything college football. NIL, transfer portal, conference realignment, the college football playoff, recapping the games from the week before, previewing the upcoming games, talking about all the news in between. That's why it's called Locked On College Football. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.